Hi there. Today we're going to take a look back at one of the most unique anime series I've ever seen, Death Note. Actually, this was my first anime that I've actually been fully invested in, recommended by a good friend one summer vacation. Of course, I had seen other anime before as a child, but Death Note was the first series that changed my perception on anime itself, viewing the genre as not just a cartoon. Most of my experiences with anime as a child was really just the series you would watch as seen on Cartoon Network in the US during the early 2000s, such as Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dragon Ball Z, Bakugan, Naruto, and One Piece, being probably the most standout series brought over to the West. But my absolute favorites would have to be Bobobo, Zatch Bell, and Hamtaro. There are many other anime series that were aired on Cartoon Network, and especially during the late night hours during the Toonami time slots, but I wouldn't really discover most of these shows until much later on in my teens. Needless to say, I viewed many of these anime series the same as just cartoons, which is mostly correct. They were made for kids at the time, but I really had no comprehension that these productions were animated overseas in Japan, nor did I realize the massive industry that they were a part of. While I did enjoy many of these anime series aired on Cartoon Network, I tended to only watch them just because they were on, finding myself often unable to follow the story arcs due to missing an episode that aired before what was already being shown currently, and just a general lack of an attention span to follow these narratives that lasted more than a single episode. As a child, I don't even think I realized that there was a chronological order to view the episodes in, leading to just a lot of confusion on my part when trying to enjoy these series. Again, at the time, I just viewed many of these anime series as like cartoons, no different than classics such as Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, or even SpongeBob, which these shows that I just mentioned often have very short self-contained stories for each episode, usually around 15 minutes. This format was really designed to where anyone could put on a single episode and enjoy them without too much prior knowledge of the show or its characters. And I guess as a child, I just couldn't really wrap my head around an animated series not following these rules. Death Note is by no means the first series to have a connecting narrative throughout all of its episodes, but it was the first that I had discovered. And man, I was hooked by its gothic and gloomy art style, as well as its thrilling, edge-of-your-seat game of mind chess between its two main characters, Light Yagami and L. Its darker themes and narrative really set itself apart from other animated series I had seen at the time, and was the first anime I had seen portraying a more grounded and realistic tone as well. But hey, maybe, this series could work in live action. I'm sure that would turn out great, right? Actually, yeah, maybe not. Let's just not mention the live action stuff. Honestly, I'd rather just watch The Simpsons Death Note parody than, the Netflix adaptation any day of the week. Yeah, on first watch of the anime, I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Watching the show late into the early morning, I finished its 37 episodes in just 2 days. And Death Note easily became like the first anime or even series that I had binge watched until completion. First being published as a manga in 2003 all the way through until finishing in early 2006, written by Oba Sugumi and art provided by Obata Takeshi. It was definitely one of the most popular manga featured in the Weekly Shonen Jump publication series, and not too long after wrapping up was adapted into an anime series in the fall of 2006 through to the summer of 2007, animated by the studio Madhouse, who's also responsible for many other legendary anime adaptations. While you're probably fully aware of Death Note's psychological and suspense-filled narrative, the basic premise is as follows. Brutal murders, petty thefts, and senseless violence pollute the human world. In contrast, the realm of death gods is a humdrum, unchanging gambling den. The ingenious 17-year-old Japanese student, Light Yagami, and sadistic god of death Ryuk share one belief: their worlds are rotten. For his own amusement, Ryuk drops his death note into the human world. Light stumbles upon it, deeming the first of its rules ridiculous. The human whose name is written in this note shall die. However, the temptation is too great, and Light experiments by writing a felon's name, which, disturbingly, enacts his first murder. Aware of the terrifying, godlike power that has fallen into his hands, Light, under the alias of Kira, follows his wicked sense of justice with the ultimate goal of cleansing the world of all evildoers. The meticulous mastermind, Detective L, is already on his trail, but as Light's brilliance rivals L's, the grand chase for Kira turns into an intense battle of wits that can only end with one of them dead. Death Note tries to ask many questions still relevant today in this ambiguous time of modern day, and is set not too long ago in the early 2000s. With the world being filled with constant crime, corruption, and an uncertain future. In these tense times, what even is a god, and what role would one even play in the modern age? What role do humans even have in these days? This series takes the dark and somewhat fun hypothetical scenario of owning a death note to the extreme, while exploring almost every possible scenario regarding the concept itself. In this complex narrative that showcases the dangers and excitement of being a psychopath with a god complex. I really love this series' dark themes and gothic art style, which is brilliantly showcased in the full art pages contained in the manga. It really helps build up the grandiose weight of the narrative and reinforces the stakes of this war between L and Kira, or Light. It's a war for humanity, civilization, and how society will be shaped for the foreseeable future. Light Yagami's at times disturbing, but nevertheless enthralling conquest on humanity is not something I personally relate to, but man is it entertaining to follow, as he just tries to justify his own actions of cleansing the world of the impure as viewed through his eyes, but only eliminating criminals and the evildoers of the world. But at a certain point, any normal person would ask themselves if the means really justify the ends. This series also introduced me to the anti-hero character archetype concept, which is found in many series nowadays, but this show's amazing and suspenseful plot utilizing this kind of protagonist led me to seek out many other fantastic series with similar anti-hero leads, such as Tony Soprano from The Sopranos, Walter White from Breaking Bad, and as far as other anime series goes, Lelouch from Code Geass especially is a great comparison and has a very similar narrative where we see the protagonist plotting for world domination utilizing a special power, but I'll save that discussion for another video. I first viewed Death Note as the English dubbed version, so I decided to return to it upon rewatching, and it's great for the most part, but I feel a lot of the more serious moments often miss their mark and come off as pretty comical instead, especially with Light's English voice actor that they use, whose attempts to sound like a genuine good guy and innocent guy sound very forced and cheesy. I honestly just cannot take him seriously, but it didn't detract from the show too much, nor was it completely unbearable. It made it a bit more enjoyable, honestly, and I think the English casting was great all around. Misa's voice actor is very annoying, which suits her character perfectly, but she still ends up being probably my favorite character, along with Elle, whose moments of monotone responses and sarcasm makes for some of the funniest moments in the series. In terms of adapting the manga into the anime, I personally still prefer the anime over the manga, with both being almost identical, so they did a good job in that regard. The anime comes across as a bit more streamlined and concise in its storytelling, while the manga has a slower, more methodical pacing that focuses more on certain characters' thought processes and plans of action, playing out as much more psychological in nature. The manga is also very exposition heavy at times due to this, with most panels just being a character's internal monologue, explaining their future motives, and recounting events that led to the current situation. It's definitely needed at times though, with some plot twists being a bit far-fetched, only making sense when explained in such a way. The manga very much feels like you're reading a game of mental chess or tug of war between Light and L for the most part, making the manga probably the most word-heavy manga I've ever read, helping to create this dense narrative. Whether it's the anime or the manga, the series can be split into three main arcs. In the beginning, we are introduced to Light, Ryuk, and the Death Note, as well as the rules that come along with it, as Light tries to navigate a school life while maintaining his secret life as Kira. In the second part, we see a now graduated Light, now a fully fledged member of the private investigation team, hunting Kira, and led by L, who he's working side by side with, as he's still playing out his role as Kira right under L's nose, which is probably the highlight of the show and my favorite part. And then we get to the third and final arc of the series, which showcases a time skip, and after a year or two, we see the introduction of L's heirs, Nier and Mello, take over in the hunt for Kira. Sadly, I feel these characters don't really live up to L, instead just feeling like cheap knockoffs. I know on my first watch of the anime, I didn't enjoy this portion of the series, but I had an even worse time reading through it in the manga. I really felt like the series loses its focus, and the slower pace in the manga just really didn't help keep my attention. Although I did come to appreciate the anime in its handling of this third part for kind of condensing it down to the more major moments and making it more easily digestible, although still the weakest part for me personally. All in all, I don't really find the rivalry between Light and Nier nearly as enjoyable as the rest of the series, but man, is it essential to the final climax of the series, when Light is finally unveiled to have been Kira the entire time to the other investigators. This moment still gives me chills and blew my mind the first time I watched it, as Light shows his true psychopathic and unhinged personality to all of them. Definitely one of the most memorable moments in anime for me personally. As I said before, this was the first series that I had really seen that involved an anti-hero as its protagonist, such as Light, so I was just expecting him to get away with it all. Instead, he faces a bitter and painful demise, delivering an insane speech about how only he could come this far, and sacrifice his life for such a noble goal of being a modern-day god, still clinging to victory, even though his conquest was clearly over. Death Note will always stand out to me as being one of the most unique series I've ever known, and I'll forever be thankful to it for changing my perspective on anime, and how the genre is much different from just being cartoons. But either way, if you have any thoughts about this great series or the video itself, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Anyways, thanks for watching, and thank you for your time.